Hello, Chris Dawson from Channel X here at the Delivery Conference, which is back in person, Andrew.
Good morning, great to see you, Chris. Welcome.
For those that don't know him, Andrew Norman of ShipStation and the group, in fact, now, isn't it? So,
Octane, that's correct, yeah. So some of the people viewing may know me when I was at Volo, when I obviously worked with a lot of marketplace brands, retailers and merchants, and then I've been at the Octane Group for about 5 years, and I'm now working as the general manager for the enterprise business focused on Metapack and ShipEngine.
So interesting day today. We've just in the last 24 hours had the news that the Royal Mail strike has thankfully been called off for February, although it'll be coming back in March once they've got a new ballot. But I thought today I'd like to find out a bit more about your views for what's going on in the wider world and what retailers can expect for 2023. So recession is likely going to impact spending, not just here in the UK, but the US, Europe, China, around the world. How's that going to impact strategies for retailers over the next few months and as the year unfolds?
So there's some research that we've just released today, I think, actually, when it's available for download. And some of the data that came out of that is, as you're exactly right, Chris, there's definitely some markets and some regions that are likely to be more impacted than others. But we definitely expect to see, or based on the data, we expect to see some green shoots of growth and some reasons to be optimistic, especially in places like the US and Australia. But certainly in UK, Germany and Italy, again, based on the data and the research there looks to be some challenging months and quarters ahead. So I guess my point is, we are, as we all know, in some difficult economic challenges, but I don't think it's all bad, and I don't think it's all doom and gloom. There are definitely opportunities in some markets for growth. And obviously one of the things I think we'll talk about today, Chris, is about your opportunity to diversify and to build as much resilience in your business. So long answer to your question, there are definitely some challenges and some headwinds. There are definitely some opportunities in some of those markets. And I think some of our messages, obviously we're very focused on the delivery and sort of the post-order part of it, which we can come back to in a second. But some of the things we talked about earlier today is really some of the strategies, I guess, that retailers and especially obviously for marketplaces too, can really adopt. And I would say the summary would be really focus on the basics without sort of wanting to sound patronizing. There's a lot of good things, about supply chain, about, exploring your costs, investing in innovation, investing in technology, automating your business. There's a lot of, I guess, the fundamentals. On some of the panels today, we had a lot of discussion about pricing, and the race to the bottom, obviously for those of you that are selling on marketplaces. And we have a single product page, sometimes it's harder to focus on your brand and your product as much as you may want. But I think my observations would be, we talked about it earlier on, that companies that invest and innovate during downturns often emerge, very strongly from those difficult times. So I think the human tendency is to batten down the hatches, but we would advocate that look at the fundamentals of a business, look about what you're selling and what channels you're selling on and through. As you will know, when we worked together previously, the unit economics, there's sometimes a lot of retailers that aren't as on top of their data and how much they're actually making from specific SKUs or specific channels. So I think, when you have a downturn and some headwinds, there is a little bit of back to basics, as I said, and really focus on doing those things well. We see supply chain challenges. We see, I see opportunities for people to invest in technology that can really help optimize their business.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of points there that I really take to heart. One is that a recession is a great leveler. I think sometimes the bigger brands would suffer more because they've had massive budgets which are now being cut, and we've seen loads of tech firms laying people off, and it will trickle down.
There's a correction for sure.
But that gives the smaller businesses an opportunity for their pound to go that much further because they haven't got the massive competition. But also I think the other interesting thing which was mentioned in the session this morning was that there are different tranches of people. There's people at the bottom with very, very little money, and there's people at the top that have perhaps not felt the impact as much, or even got more money to spend than normal. And for luxury goods, that's good news.
Yeah, I think, just paraphrasing the report for those of you that want to download it, we identified four types of buying personas, as you say, from people that are definitely searching for value, and at the other end of the spectrum, to your point, people that maybe have more disposable income and are able to carry on as they previously were. I think it is a little bit of polarization, although you would argue, we're probably all guilty or...
I'll tell you, I'm feeling the inflation and the mortgage rates.
Exactly.
I'm going to be going towards the bottom bucket, I think, this year.
Exactly right.
So I want to move on a little bit.
Sure.
Because something that we've talked about for years is the final mile. And what's really going to happen with it? We've talked about things like click and collect that everyone would love because it gets people into potentially your own store, maybe someone else's, or locker deliveries. There's been all these ideas of shared delivery routes rather than having sort of the Royal Mail, then Parcelforce, then DPD, then Amazon, and then every coming down the road, one courier bring all of my parcels. Where do you actually see that kind of going, especially when we're talking more about sustainability and the ecological impact of deliveries? What's the next move for the carriers?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think carriers is one part of it. I think there's, as you know very well, it's ultimately, I guess, about choice and about convenience, I think is the kind of story, right? And obviously within that is experience, right? So I think you see different cycles of pick up in store, click and collect. They're all very relevant options. I think we're maybe a little bit biased, but we believe in giving consumers choices, and allow them to select their, have their preference for the consumer, excuse me. So we advocate multiple carriers, multiple carrier choices. We are, I guess, all about the experience. And so that's kind of, I think, where we see more, that kind of carrier selection and that carrier choice is becoming a little bit, more mainstream. And I think it's really about the experience, certainly the post-ship. So a big area that we're invested in is what we call post-ship experience. So your ability to track and control and manage that experience all the way through that journey. And also we're investing a lot in data and intelligence. So there's different products that we have in different stages, alpha and beta, to give our retailers the ability to predict when there's likely to be issues with the experience. So I think bringing it back to your question, we see maybe the newer battlegrounds, certainly around data and intelligence, around the delivery experience, and certainly, post-ship is a big focus for us, and putting that control back into the consumer.
And moving on to that, everyone's talking about AI, especially with ChatGPT and everything coming up. Yeah. But where do you see that moving into the world of e-commerce for things like shipping, forecasting, customer experience? If you've got a Wizmo, where is my parcel? Right. Is that going to be an automated chatbot, or is it going to be a human? And in fact, for some carriers, they've been in the news that you just can't get through to them full stop. And I should say that's probably because you should be speaking to the retailer rather than the carrier if you're the recipient. But where do you see AI fitting into all of this?
It's a great question, Chris. Yeah, we talked about it, for those of you, that are watching this back, we talked about it earlier on one of our panels, because I think, when you could say that Amazon have done a really good job of being an early adopter, right, of using AI and data. They're very, very mature users of it. I would say in the overall scheme of things, it's still a very early stage. We're still seeing relatively early adoption. My observations are we've seen definitely a lot of AI and bots, chatbots, about what we call deflection. When you're to try and avoid crushing your customer service team with questions. But I think again, when you start to see in the technology platform or technology companies, there's definitely some really interesting marketing intelligence, to get better return on your ad spend. So there's Up and a few other companies, as you know, that are really making some good inroads into that. A lot on pricing, which again has been, for those of you that are selling on marketplaces, will be very familiar with the repricing technology, the different ones that exist in the market for Amazon and for other platforms. So I think depending on different parts of that commerce life cycle, there are definitely more mature adoption of some of that AI. But we, as I say, we're definitely focused on the sort of AI side for predicting the delivery experience and to give the control back to the retailer and to the consumer. So that's a big focus area for us.
And I think it's something that retailers have been wanting for years, because even things like you talked about Amazon, it goes not just for the delivery but also the return. I know that with Amazon often, as soon as the carrier's got the parcel, you got the money back in your bank account, and it's seamless.
It's a great experience. Yeah.
I think also from the retailer's perspective, they know what stock's coming back, and if you've got high return rates and things like fashion, becomes more and more important. But it's when do you remarket that stock? You know, it's the carrier, but is it going to be good? Is it what percentage of it will be instant resellable? What's got to be repackaged or is distressed?
That's right. I think it comes back to the point we were talking about earlier. I think, you know, there are some, as you know, AI and great technologies for that, you know, inventory management, stock control and demand forecasting. You know, there's a lot of very mature platforms there. So I think, coming back to some of your earlier points, it feels to me that there's a pretty, you know, there's a good democratization of technology. I think for those of you watching, you know, it is easy to get access to good technology at a very affordable price point to build your capability for the future and to make your business more resilient.
So talking about forecasting, I'm going to change tack a little bit.
Right, what have we got for that?
We've just come through Q4, which was interesting with the Royal Mail strike, which impacted all of the carriers. Dragged some spend forward. A lot of retailers were almost forced to give up and shut up shop incredibly early this year, like a week before, 2 weeks before Christmas.
Yeah.
What are your predictions, your early predictions, I'll say, for Q4 2023? What's going to happen in
You're asking me in February,
We've got to start planning.
Yeah, no, it's totally.
Christmas
100%,
is coming.
100%. You know, the Royal Mail one, I'm not even going to try and predict that one, right? I mean, there's quite a, you know, that's a difficult process, let's say, that we're working through. But there's definitely already been a shift, I would say. You know, I think people are diversifying within their carriers. I think, to answer your question directly about the carrier side, I think that's what we've already seen. How permanent that remains is yet to be seen, but people have definitely realised the benefit of having a multi-carrier strategy. I think, coming back to your earlier points about the markets, you know, I feel personally quite optimistic about the volume for the UK. You know, there's been some really encouraging data from the IMF and from, I guess, from the Bank of England and other places that the recession may be shorter and not as deep as we first expected it to be. So, and
interest rates almost peaked, we hope.
Exactly. I mean, that's the discussion, right? Is the rate of inflation kind of peaked? So, you know, we definitely feel very optimistic. I think there's certain categories that are doing well and probably will do well during peak. I think fashion and obviously is challenged, as you know. And we hope, you know, for the sake of our retailers, that comes back. But that there are definitely, my sense is there are categories that will do very well during peak, and I think the UK overall will be in a more positive place this peak, is my sense.
So hopefully by the time that summer's here and Christmas is coming, and once we get through August and we get into sort of the September, October, it'll be maybe we should sit down again and take another look closer to the time.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah.
But I think hopefully inflation will be on the way down. Hopefully interest rates will be on the way down, or at least stabilised. Energy prices look like they're going to be stabilising towards the summer, perhaps even less than the government cap. Yeah. So although there's a lot of doom and gloom,
there's reasons to be optimistic, I think.
Reasons for towards the end of the year that people may be feeling a bit better. And maybe even the strikes that are going on will be over by then. So it'll be great to catch up again in the autumn, Andrew.
Great, good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Cheers.